Okay, my name's Dave Shipman, astrologer, president of Kronos Astrological Services. What I think is probably most understood about astrology that I would like for people to understand is that it's not up there, it's here. It's in our hearts and it's in the chakras that motivate us, that we live for in our lives. What we see in the sky is actually reflected in everything that we do. Everything living that's living on this earth is affected by the planets, more so, and somewhat by the stars. However, the planets, as we all know, have tremendous amount of power. We all know that the sun, without the sun, there'd be no life on earth. So it's probably taken for granted, but it is very, very important. And if you look at the sun as it goes through its phases year to year, it incorporates most of what astrologers take for granted. As the seasons change, so do the essence of our beings. The seasons are reflected in us as individuals. For example, if you were to look at a person that was born in the middle of the summer as opposed to the middle of the winter, you would find two very distinct characteristics about this individual, their vitality. A Cancer will be someone who's quite warm, quite emotional, and very, very sensitive. This is a very powerful nurturing energy that is reflected in what we see in the tropical zodiac, or in the places on earth where the seasons change. We see a tremendous amount of growth, and during that period of time it's a lot of nourishment going on, and that's probably reflected in the character of the person. The fact that Cancers are very nourishing people, as opposed to the opposites, which would be Capricorn. Born in the middle of the winter, you would find an individual who is very ambitious, very objective, and quite insensitive in a characteristic manner. Now, these are very generalized, but you will find that this pattern repeats itself over and over and over again. So we must realize that the main difference has nothing to do with all of the positions of the sky, because the sky is the same everywhere, all over the world. It's where we are that makes the difference here on earth. If you're in California as opposed to the East Coast, there's going to be a marked difference in the circumstances of your life. Now, I've kind of entered into the houses as well, but my main emphasis at this point is for people to understand that the sky is not up there, it's in here, and it resounds in the things that we do every day.
Now, you said that the sky's in here. What do you mean by the sky's in here?
It resonates in our lives,
Okay.
in the things we do and the circumstances that we find our lives unfolding in. For instance, if we were to look at the idea of the houses, I think many people have recognized that there's a system called houses in astrology, and someone who finds themselves in the first house, or their son is born in the first house, means that they were born between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. in the morning. Now, this house is a reflection of who you are and how other people see you. And if you're born between 4 and 6 in the morning, you will always be someone who's concerned with their identity, who they are, and how others see you. The first house is the identity, who you are, and how other people see you.
Okay.
It's mainly wherever you are, that house would be considered between the hours of 4 a.m. 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. But it would make a person whose son was in that house very self-centered, regardless of what sign they're in. It could be Aries, Taurus, Gemini, any of the 12 signs. they would be primarily concerned with their identity most of their lives. Now, the son doesn't stay there all of their lives, but we'll go through the houses first so that you'll get an idea of what they mean. The second house is about finances, your personal resources. That's your money.
Okay.
And that's a circumstance of life. Most of all of the houses reflect a circumstance of life. And as I go through each one of them, I will explain that particular circumstance. The second house being your personal resources. The third house is communication, general communication, sisters and brothers, and how you function in the immediate environment. Someone born whose son is in the third house would be someone who is truly a communicator, someone who likes to talk a lot, someone who moves around in their immediate area quite a bit. And communication, especially verbal communication, it could be visual communication as well, but they are truly a communicator.
Okay.
The fourth house is home, and it's a very powerful place. The first, fourth, seventh, and 10th. But the fourth house is the home. That's your deepest and most intrinsic values. People born in the fourth house are primarily concerned with the fundamental things in life, and mainly how they were raised in their home at the time of their birth. They'll always be concerned with their family. They'll find themselves always a deep, more value-oriented person. But family will be very much the theme of their life. The fifth house is a very creative house. It's considered the house of children and creative expression. Children are entered in that area mainly because children and the act of having children is one of the most powerful creative forces on the earth. However, it also means personal creativity, such as art or drama, sports, many categories that people are relatively reflecting their personal senses of creativity will find that they unfold. If their son is in that house, that's where they would express their personal creativity. The sixth house is associated with the circumstance of health and personal service. Now, health is something we all are aware of. Usually people who are born with their son in the sixth house are sensitive to their personal health. They're athletes. Very often they become athletes, but their personal health is very important. Now, it's possible to ignore these circumstances, but when it comes to personal health, if you don't find yourself involved in your personal health, your health will become an issue in your life. So it's always a good idea to find yourself conscientious of your personal health. Also, it's related to personal service, and that's a service it could be the service that you provide, and most of the time it's the personal service you provide for someone else. It's not quite the same as your career, but it could possibly be if you are lucky to have your natural desires also related to your career aspirations. But it's not necessarily your career aspirations. It is strictly personal, more or less personal service and your personal health. Now, the seventh house is directly across from the first house. So instead of the first house being your identity, who you are, and how other people see you, the seventh house are significant others. People whose son is in the seventh house have powerful relationships with people, and they find that their life unfolds in the lives of others. This is a person that you will probably find not only married, but maybe multiple marriages, because they are very concerned with those significant relationships in their life. Significant relationships are also related to open enemies as well as partners, people who are very important to them in their lives. The eighth house, being opposite to the second, would be not only other people's resources, but joint mutual resources. Very often when you get married, the eighth house is not only joint mutual resources, but it's your husband's or your wife's personal resources. This is where two people come together, or a group of people possibly come together to provide a joint mutual gain of some sort. preferably finances, but it could be a project that people engage in, but it's certainly a joint mutual interest. Now, the eighth house is also very considered through the ancients and less of a modern approach, but it's also considered the house of death, the house, the circumstance where you inherit income or income from a significant other or a family member, but it's other people's resources and how you engage in other people's resources. So death would be considered by the ancients very important in that area, but it doesn't have to be death. You know, it can be just joint mutual resources. And it's also, most people who have the sun in the eighth house will probably have an inheritance of some sort, either their family's inheritance or the inheritance from their significant other. Now, the ninth house, the opposite of the third, is very similar to communication, but it's higher communication. It's like the higher mind, philosophy, religion, someone who goes out after their initial education and seek higher education. People who study anthropology or want to understand the meaning of life and the higher things that motivate us in life find themselves, their sons, in this ninth house. Excuse me. People with ninth house sons are usually travelers, people who want to find the answer to things, and very often they travel large distances, but most of the time they find themselves in higher education roles of one way or another. That's if the sun is there or there's a significant amount of other energies there. Now, the 10th house is an extremely powerful place. It's your career. It's actually your public ascension in this world. It's where we reach our highest point of recognition. And very often, most of the time, that has to do with our careers in our lives. Sometimes it could be if not in a favorable light, it could be lack of career ascension. But it is how the career or the ascension in this lifetime is reflected. So most people who have a sun in the 10th house is very often in the public's eye, depending upon the sign it's in, but they are very often in the public's eye, and they are people out in the world that project themselves strongly. The 11th house is your hopes, your wishes, your groups and organizations, and those friends that support you. It's a very fortunate place to be. It reflects a person who has a lot of friends or has a lot of interest in organizations and groups and people, their colleagues. It's considered a very fortunate place to have the sun. And if you do, then you would find that you have lots of friends and lots of powerful people in organizations and in high places in life. And finally, the 12th house, which is the opposite of the 6th, is social obligation as opposed to personal obligation and service. The people who have the sun in the 12th house are usually people who feel as though they have a strong social obligation. And at the same time, they operate behind the scenes in a very supportive way. They're hidden. And most of the time, people whose sun is in the 12th house are support people who support others, but they have a powerful need for to express their social expression out in the world, but to help other people. It's a place of compassion, but it's also considered not a good place, according to the ancients. It's considered not the most fortunate circumstance for your son to be. However, this is very generalized. No one has all of their energies in one house, hopefully. But if someone has the sun in the 12th house, they'll find that they support others and they have a strong sense of providing a social have a need to provide a social service for society. They are very sensitive to the needs of the group and the collective efforts that people need in life. And that pretty much goes through, it explains the 12 houses. The 12 houses should be always recognized as circumstance.